Hello and welcome to another episode of the CG Garage. This is episode number 363 featuring Mariana Acuna, who is fabulous and I've wanted to have on this podcast for so long. I'm so glad that Sally finally did the introduction and helped us out with that. She is the Senior Vice President of Global Virtual Production and On-Set Services at Technicolor. But she's actually done a lot of other stuff that's interesting as well. And I was most interested in some of the work she'd done over at Glassbox Technologies. But in general, she's got an incredible career. And we talk about that real quick. Kristen, what did you think of Mariana?
Oh, she as I say, she moves fast. I think she said doing her first visual effects film via Photoshop. And then now she does everything from on-set work to virtual production, game engines, building and managing teams, product launches, software and hardware solutions to workflows and pipelines. She's amazing. And she kind of kept looking for the next best thing. And always knew she could do better. And her story of co-founding Glassbox Technologies is just very unique. And it designs next generation software tool sets that enable content creators all over the world to use the power of game engines and real-time virtual production. So just to create immersive content for feature films, TV, animation, games. It's just, she's amazing. And just everything she talks about, she just, the virtual production, she explains we are virtual beings and to fix it in pre. So yeah. And you guys talk about the metaverse, obviously. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was really great. I mean, she's she's a very, very bright woman, and I was very interested in all of the things that she was talking about. We did start getting into the metaverse quite a bit, and she and I saw eye to eye on a lot of that stuff, which was also really cool. We probably could have gone another hour of conversation on that, so I'll probably see if we can get her back at some point and talk a little bit more. But she was really great. I really like what she has to say, and obviously her technology that she's been doing and how it's enabled people to do a lot of these things are really cool. And she worked on The Day After Tomorrow, which was my first film I worked on as well. So really great, as she was an on-set person on that one as well. So really great to have Mariana. Okay, I don't think we have any announcements or any product launches going on right now. Can you tell me what's going on with the podcast?
All right, so you can find us at facebook.com/CG Garage Podcast or chaos.com/CG Garage. And if you'd like to watch us, go to youtube.com/Chaos Group TV.
Perfect. And if you have any questions about the podcast or you have any suggestions you'd like to do, you can always email us at labs@chaosgroup.com. Again, that is labs@chaosgroup.com. But for now, enjoy episode number 363 with Mariana Acuna.
Welcome to another CG Garage, where the Chaos Group talks. You'll know it's over when the last bucket drops. We're gonna fire off rays in high dynamic range. We know that ambient occlusion is passé. Global illumination won't lead you astray. And while image-based lighting is really swell, you need to make sure everything has fun now.
Fun going.
It's fun. Okay, I'm all about the fun.
It's all about the fun, right? So good. I'm glad you're able to do this. And thank you, Sally, again, for getting us in touch with you. I've actually wanted to do a podcast with you for a long time, believe it or not, because I thought it would be really fun. And I have a lot of questions about kind of the fun things that you do. But I think before we get into that, let's get a little bit into your back history. Let's find out a little bit how you got involved in CG. You have an extensive resume. So I'd like to know a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure, Chris. And thank you, Sally. And thank you again for having me. Well, let's see. Well, I'm originally from Mexico City, and the movie Terminator and Alien really changed my life. I was like, I need to make movies. I need to make those things that are on the screen. I don't know what they were called at the time, but I knew I wanted to do that. And I went to college, and it was the first time that a career in visual effects and CG art, animation, and programming was opening up in Mexico. And I was like, this is the future. I will always have a job. And I was right. So I'm glad I did that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did a lot of fun stuff in college. I did a lot of short films, experimental animation, stop motion. My thesis was in stop motion. I did a whole movie using, visual effects, but in Photoshop because I didn't have any other software at the time. And I did film strip frame by frame. Oh my God. So yeah,
Really? Wow.
yes, you name it. I've done it all. So then from there, I was hired to work in New York City, like straight out of college, to do visual effects for an artist there in New York. That was pretty amazing. But from there, I realized very quickly that I needed to expand my horizons. And so I did another master's degree in Spain, where I did a lot of, interactive design and 3D animation and post-production and rigging. And I did that for quite a while. And then I moved to Los Angeles and studied visual effects and on-set supervision. And
Yes.
from then on, yeah, I started to work on set. I did movies like The Day After Tomorrow and
Oh, I was on
Troll.
that.
Oh, were you really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. What were you doing?
That was my first visual effects job was Day After Tomorrow at DD. So,
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I was on set making sure that the people on the US side were crossing into the river into the Mexican side. Like,
oh,
remember?
right. Yeah, I remember that shot. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
at the time I was a second AD, a second AD. Well, yeah, so that was pretty fun. And then with Troy, also I started with the whole, visual effects assisting, and also I worked with Robert Rodriguez, and yeah, all of that. It was pretty amazing. So I also opened up a visual effects company in Mexico City. I worked for funny enough.
Which one did you work for in Mexico City? Which one was it?
So I worked at a lean studio in Mexico City, but
Oh,
then I
yeah.
opened my own company doing visual effects. But when I was working at a lean, we were actually doing the overflow work for Digital Domain.
Yeah. You were working on this movie. Hold on.
Yeah, and on a lot of
There
other
it is.
movies.
Yeah. But I do
Yeah,
remember you guys working on Tron, and it was great,
yeah,
great work,
thank you.
really good work. Yeah.
And I also became a post producer in Mexico and visual effects supervisor, so on set. I mean, everything. But I was bored at some point. I was bored. And I was like, you know what? I got to move where everything is, which was LA. And my teacher from Nomon School of Visual Effects gave me my first job in Los Angeles working for the movie Surrogates.
Okay.
Remember with Bruce Willis? And yeah, they all had to be robots. And he left.
Yeah.
Leave yourself at home. Oh, we should have had one of those in the pandemic. Then the robots could have gone and hang out and have a good time for us. I then went into software development after, because as you know, the visual effects work is a little,
Yeah, it was a little hard at the time. Yeah.
yeah. Oh,
I
has it
remember
changed?
you were in the Life After Pi documentary. Am I correct about that?
Yes, you are correct. I do a lot of swearing on that.
Yeah. That was one of the times when I decided to sort of get out of the visual effects industry too. I just didn't want to do that anymore. But yeah, it was interesting. Anyway, go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, well, I also tried to, unionize, and I was like the
I,
face of that movement for quite a while, but it didn't go well, as you
right.
know. It did
Yeah.
not go very well. Not one of the successes in my career.
Yep.
So I was tired of that, and I was actually just thinking like, oh man, what should I do next? And I was doing a lot of teaching. I've done a lot of teaching through the years, but I knew I didn't want to do that full time either. And then that's when I met the amazing folks from the Foundry, and they offered me a job. And so I quickly became the head of product specialists, even though they were called creative specialists, but same thing. And so I also then, little by little, also became very involved in virtual reality and real-time technologies. I opened up a company in Mexico doing VR and 360 branded content and interactive content. At the same time as I was at the Foundry, they were very supportive, really nice guys. And, I helped with the development of Cara VR and Modo VR at the time. But once again, I wanted to do something more. And so then I left and I
Yeah.
opened up another company called Glassbox Technologies.
Yep.
And we set out to build tools for virtual production to democratize what was out there, all the tools being accessible for content creators of, all sizes, big and small.
Yep.
And that, I have to say, has been amazing, and so many customers, so many clients. The team has been just absolutely amazing. We've done so much work with different folks. And then, of course, as things have to continue to evolve, the pandemic hit March 2020. And so my LA team was like, bye, no one wants to be in the epicenter of the pandemic. Goodbye. So everybody kind of left, and I started, the company kept going, of course. And actually 2020 was one of the best years we ever did, because we're doing remote collaboration and virtual production, but to help you whether you were at home. We pivoted the roadmap, but also because my son wasn't going to school, I wasn't commuting, or I wasn't traveling. I became kind of like I had some more time on my hands than usual, and so Epic Games approached me, and I became the virtual production mentor for their fellowships. We graduated over 500 people from a ton of different countries. I was also the previous supervisor for a program that happened in New York with Tribeca. I also became an authorized training instructor. I did a lot during these lockdown years in LA. And also continue to be, obviously growing an integral part of Glassbox. And just this year, at the beginning of this year, which is very fresh, I've just became the Senior Vice President of Virtual Production and On-Set Services for Technicolor.
Wow.
So here, that's it. That's where I am.
That is amazing that you got through all of that information in about 7 minutes. So I'm going to try to go back and dissect some of this stuff as we go, because there was a lot of stuff. Obviously, you like being on set, and you're a very active person, I can tell. So you really like to do a lot of those things. What was your favorite part of working on the features back then?
Really collaborating with people in real life and seeing, I remember like the art department was always amazed by just the output that they could produce in terms of work, and just saying, making brands that don't exist, and, putting them and creating like beers and posters and things like that. And also I always was really mesmerized by the props department and seeing how they could build, guns and shields and all kinds of armory.
Right.
And, being so proud of their work. And this, oh my God, the stunts, working with the stunts is incredible. I mean, you see the stuff that they do, you're like, oh my God, I would have broken 500 bones by now.
Yeah, I love being on set. It was a lot of fun, for sure, but it is a lot of stress. Did you find it hard? Did you find it hard to sort of make those decisions at that exact moment that you have to make them?
Yeah, especially, when you're doing night shoots. Night shoots were really hard for me. It was like, my body was like, no, I want to sleep. No, I want to sleep. So, I mean, it was really hard. And also, you're called, for example, in the day after tomorrow, the extras, after being inside that river for 9 hours straight. The extras, I couldn't move my legs. I was completely numb, and the extras had to carry me to their tent, to where they had like the craft services, and they actually had to pour the hot water that they use for those noodle soups on my legs, so that I could actually like start moving them again. And the extras were all worried about me. So yeah, I mean, those kinds of things are definitely not fun, or watching people get hurt, because that happens also.
Wow. Yeah. That is kind of stressful for sure. Okay. I do want to get a little bit into VR and what got you interested in VR. Now you were working at, when we were doing stuff at the Foundry, you were doing stuff in VR. So can you tell people a little bit about what the products were in VR at that time that Foundry was working on?
Yeah. So it was, I don't think the product on Modo, which was, Modo's a 3D system, 3D application, kind of like Maya, and they were working on a VR tool to do sculpting in VR. It was actually really amazing. I don't think that ever saw the light of day, but Kara VR was a plugin for Nuke where you could, stitch, track, comp, do, like particle simulations and stuff like that in a 360 environment, which was, and you could also be wearing the headset. And so look at all the, all of your work, all of your shot at the same time, which at the time was not, available.
Right.
And the automatic stitching, plus, stereo cameras and whatnot that were very hard. Because, at the time it was a lot of just a manual process. So Car VR just automated all that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Nuco's had some pretty amazing tools, including some good, really great stereo tools as well. So they probably borrowed a little bit of that system together. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, they did from Ocula.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, the research team at the Foundry has always been incredible. I mean, incredible minds, working on just
Right.
the latest technology. Yeah.
And when you started your company, your VR company, which was Jolt, right? It was Jolt VR,
hmm
right?
hmm
So when you started Jolt, what were some of the things that you guys were looking at doing then?
Well, what we're trying to do is also making it accessible because either at the time, if you wanted to do, say, a music video,
Hmm.
even if it was 360, or if you just wanted to add maybe a little bit of interactivity or whatnot, it was really expensive at the time. So the reason why I opened it up in Mexico City is because no one was doing it over there. So I brought, but I know because I worked there, as I was explaining before, I know that there's so much like talent and hardworking people that if I brought the know-how there and taught them how to do it, then, I could bid projects here and we could get those projects and then, kind of bring having the talent in Mexico do the work and then really, they could learn and apply those skills for other things in the future to get like better jobs and more jobs in the future
Right.
while being able to actually get those jobs here is because they were so cost prohibitive at the time. And one of the reasons why a lot of companies went under at the time is because, people were expecting ROI in VR and there really wasn't any. And we also wanted to experiment and we did a lot of music projects and you show a QR code that now we're so used to, right?
Hmm.
But then it would, if you had a Google Cardboard branded with, the musicians or the band, and then it would take you to the lyrics and the video, and you could download you could download it. So yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Just have fun and help creatives, and be it cost effective.
Right. Right. But I mean, yeah, I know there was definitely a lot of content creation. There's not as much content creation of those types of videos being done today. I don't think that there used to be back then.
No, no, I don't think so. I mean, if anything, there's a lot more, I think, very focused in terms of the industry because VR is alive and well, as we know, but either,
Hmm.
you're making games or you're in automobile or you're in, design or real estate or education,
Hmm.
training and simulation, but not so much, I feel, for entertainment purposes. I feel like some some of those artists that stayed in VR are probably doing a lot more interactive work now and doing things for like the New Frontier program and Sundance and things like that.
Right. 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 Okay. But how did the things that you did in the VR world, how did those apply to your knowledge in terms of virtual production?
Well, it was really well virtual reality because I was doing so much development and work in virtual reality. That's what brought me into the game engines, right? So
Right.
Unity and Unreal. And then, so I learned how to use both, and I started to see how, deploying into different platforms and just how interactive they were and how easy it was to create interactivity. So that was like what really got me interested in virtual production because of what these real-time technologies could really mean for the film industry, and then really seeing little by little, thanks to VR as well,
Mhm.
saying all these different, like branched narratives, so like choose your own adventures type work. And then, a lot more of like gameplay scenarios, right? When telling stories. And then, of course, also seeing some stories produced using AR as well. So, moving from VR just a second,
Mhm.
like for a second, AR as well. And then just thinking about the possibilities that that could bring to the filmmaking process when you can use virtual reality for location scouting, when you can use AR to start doing, blocking and layout and having, like a predefined library of sets and props and what you can do with that. I mean, I really kind of started to see that the sky is the limit and the way that we consume and create and distribute content was definitely going to change. And I wanted to be there at the forefront of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny, talking about your being on set and freezing your legs in a river and understanding the stresses of production. How do you think, like, what do you think you're able to bring from your experience in production to the virtual production set, like, setting up things and talking about props and art departments and things of that nature. Now that you're doing this all virtually, what were you able to bring to that, your knowledge of the practical to the virtual sets?
I think being able to translate concepts for filmmakers that may come from or content creators that come from a more traditional background, and just really helping them understand that it's just like the cameras, right? It's just when we went from black and white to color and optical to digital, it's just an evolution of the technology because we're humans and we never stop, kind of like advancing and wanting more and more in terms of technology, right? And so really bridging that gap with content creators and helping them with maybe non-technical terms, because sometimes virtual production is seen as very technical, and bringing in this live action and on-set expertise into explaining them how everything that they've been doing live action and on set can just be applied to the virtual world, and how to apply those concepts and that expertise and not to be afraid of that. So it's helped me there. And as well, I think it's helped me to kind of keep calm, because as you know, also when you're on set, there's a lot of personalities. Things can get real hairy sometimes. And so virtual production, it's not, doesn't save itself from that as well. So I think I feel like after living through a lot of that craziness on set, and just bringing a more chill, calm attitude. Just let's keep calm and we'll figure it out. We'll work it out.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I am actually really curious about, you mentioned that people, if you translate it to them, like, hey, this is just like live action and here's how, that's really helpful. But do you think that now that you have people that are live action people that are in virtual sets and looking at CG through the lens that they're used to looking at it? Because before, you'd shoot something and then it would go into this black box called visual effects, and I'd have to wait forever to see something coming out of that black box, but they had no control over what was going on in there. But now that you take them into virtual production and they're like, no, you have control over this. You can move the camera, you can do the lighting, you can direct it the way you would direct a real movie. Do you think that is going to change their attitude about like what visual effects is and what computer graphics are?
I'm not so sure that it will change how they feel about visual effects, because I think, unfortunately, that whole attitude of fix it in post was so prevalent, and it was just kind of brought this, like, it opened this Pandora's box, whereas before you used to do, kind of figure it out how to do this really hard, difficult things, how to make the shots, and, just brought all this like creativity and collaboration. But then, unfortunately, what happened with, the advent and explosion of visual effects and the attitude of fix it in post, then it's like, kind of removing the decision-making process from the creatives, and then just leaving it into the hands of the visual effects artists, which, as talented as, they are, or we are, but maybe I'm still one at heart. Ultimately, it's not your movie, it's not your story. So you are not, you're just the tool to help create that story. So if you don't have the right feedback, that's what gave way to like 96, versions and shots being caught, and, filmmakers being very disappointed with visual effects in general. So I don't know if their attitude towards visual effects is going to change as much as feeling like virtual production is going to give them something more that they didn't have before, and feeling like they could have that creative control back in their hands and being able to visualize. I think, to me, virtual production really, to why it makes me so excited is just the ability to visualize, because as humans, we are visual beings, so many, it doesn't matter how many times we're going to hear, oh, the book was better, but we still go and see the movie, right? And we love the movie, and then, right?
Right.
Like we're just visual beings. So the ability to bring that creative control, give them back the creative control, making them letting them make decisions earlier in the process, being able to see things like lighting and effects at the very beginning instead of at the very end. I think that is just something super valuable that will just continue to bring more and more content creators and all kinds of filmmakers into virtual production, because, and not only does it help tremendously when it comes to when we're talking about live action and on set, but I mean, real-time animation pipelines, right? And all this like experiential, interactive content that you can produce as well, like that show Alter Ego and, digital humans, meta humans, the metaverse. Oh my God, don't get me started. So it's just like so much potential all across the board.
Yeah, for sure. But so it does sound like virtual production is preventing the fix it and post attitude because they're looking at it right now, right?
Correct. And now it's called fix it in pre.
Fix it. Yeah, fix it now.
Fix it now. And that's always been the case, right? Like the more I used to hear this in production all the time, where it was like, and there was a movie where we were in pre-production for something around like 6 months. And so what does that, translate into? That translates into really knowing what and when you're going to shoot or better, not having 500 takes, just being lean, mean, and a lot more efficient and effective. And I think that's what virtual production is bringing back into the table as well, just a lot more efficiency into the mix.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously you mentioned, the pandemic really, like you guys are very, very busy, which is interesting because a lot of people couldn't shoot. And so everyone's like, virtual production will save everything, right? Or LED walls will save everything. but what was that? What were some of the benefits? Obviously you could do things that people didn't have to actually be in a physical location. Is that right?
That's right. But I'm not going to touch too much around like pandemic and the LED walls, because that's a completely different beast, if you will. That's
Sure.
a completely different story. And you would still, like me living in LA, you can really go anywhere or shoot anywhere, right? But
Right.
what you could do is have a virtual scene and then, bring or not bring, but ship an iPad to a director that they could then see this virtual scene and then, without them having to be technical or anything like that, and then be able to start shooting virtual camera. Or something that was done so much during the I don't want to say the pandemic because we're still in it, but the beginning, the early days of the pandemic, you're going to Google Earth VR, which is such a mainstream VR app.
Right.
And let alone the VR app, everybody knows the 2D app, right? So then you're going to Google Earth VR, and then you're in the headset, and you're actually able to collaborate with other people in your project at the same time in VR and scout a location, et cetera, right? And then maybe also do the same thing, be in VR at the same time while you're looking at your scene, you're making decisions, maybe you're looking at scale or you're doing asset reviewing or whatnot. But that's why it accelerated. Everything virtual production really accelerated during the pandemic, because what you thought was going to happen in 4 or 5 years happened right away because people were at their houses, and then they were actually able to test and start, iterating maybe on ideas. And also the fact that you have things like the marketplace from Epic Games and like quick sell mega scans, and you can actually create, it's like really easy to recreate using all these tools available at your disposal. You can recreate cities and streets and buildings and whatnot. And then you have like metahumans, which are also free. So you can start just like creating a short, a full animated CG, real-time, not CG, real-time short and whatnot, right? And so, yeah, all of that is why I think the pandemic accelerated this, just because people had the time. Or, even like motion capture suits, there are a lot of very they're cost effective, if you will, not cost prohibitive motion capture suits like the Rococo, or you can get some gloves with the haptics, and you can get like a Vive HTC setup with the trackers. You can put it into an iPad, and then you have your little virtual camera, and boom, all of a sudden you're doing, virtual production in your office. We did a lot of that back in the day. So again, I think the pandemic became the little sandbox, if you will, or the virtual box for people to try out new technology.
Yeah, I agree. I did exactly that. I shot some motion capture in my backyard. So, so yeah, absolutely know what you're talking about. And I think it's really great, because it was very, in order to do anything, you have to have like $1 million stage that had to be built to do everything. And you don't need that anymore. Have you seen the Move AI stuff? That seems very interesting too.
The which one?
Move AI.
No, please tell me. Or is that the AI that's helping you do
It's
the
motion
mocap?
capture, but it's markerless, and it just uses.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And I was actually just thinking about the other day. I was like, you know what? I've been so entrenched in this past 2 years of because I was also into AI very much so. I was just thinking about that, like machine learning. Where is all that with this? Which
Hmm.
I mean, I remember seeing a lot of tools as well where it cleans up like the in between of your mockup data, so there's not that much manual input and whatnot. So
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I'm very interested in seeing that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Glassbox and what some of the tools are that you create there, and how does that start? Let's say you're a company and you want to try to do things. What can Glassbox do to help your company?
Well, first and foremost, we do a lot of consultancy services.
Okay.
So pipeline integration, if you have like a traditional pipeline and you want to bring in real-time technologies into the mix, we help you with that, with the architecture, and just help you figure it out what that all means.
Hmm.
Also, motion capture consultancy services, maybe help you figure out what kind of motion tracking system you need, whether it's for face or body. We also help you with LED stage design and build outs as well. And then we have three products out into the world. One is a virtual camera, and that's, we had a whole other roadmap in 2020, but come the pandemic, we pivoted fully to
Hmm.
just figure out how to make it VPN friendly, work in the cloud, be able to just send iPads to directors and work remotely. Like we just fully switched to help virtual cinematographers in
Right.
in the time of need. So it works across the board exactly the same in Unreal Engine and Maya, because we have like a proprietary technology that
Hmm.
you can hook up into any DCC or engine.
Right.
And then we have Live Client, which is our facial performance capture solution, and we did a whole video for the meta humans and how you can use your blend shapes and how you can just take control, a lot more control to do your animation and just puppeteer your digital avatar, if you
Right.
will. And then we have Beehive, which we won a Technical Lumiere Award for, which is a source control, version control, just your whole what do you call it, Swiss Army knife toolkit for virtual production. We
Okay.
used to call it the Google Docs of game engines, because you can be at the same level at the same time, sort of like a multi-user type workflow, but gives you the advantage of many other things at the same
And
time.
that's inside the game engine itself, right? So you could basically assign
Or my
role
Yes.
or my okay. So you basically assign roles to people, like, okay, you're lighting this, you're moving that,
Camera.
your camera here, and then it all syncs together with Beehive, right?
Correct. Or you could be in layout, or maybe you're in the virtual art department, you need to optimize assets and you need to do a bunch of stuff. Then that's where you would, Beehive would come to the table. And what's really cool about it is also, we're thinking, well, just use the right tool for the right job, right?
Hmm.
So we understand that a lot of the Maya artists that have been working in Maya for 20 years, they have no intention to jumping into any engine. Like they just want to continue working in their preferred tool. So then that way, Maya artists can be tweaking some certain things, inside of Maya, and then the Unreal Engine artists or the technical artists can actually see those changes inside the engine. So that means that you don't, have to remove or modify the artists that you already have within your studio or your preferred way of working. Like they can all just be in their environment, in their preferred environment, and work in that way.
Right. Right. And then, well, not all the tools can do the same things, right? So that's also
Correct.
right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, what's your thought about the like collaboration tools, right? Because now obviously virtual production is, you have to work, a big team of people just has to work all together, right? So now there's a lot of ideas about collaborative tools. Obviously, there's things like Omniverse or even Unreal itself, and even just the idea of what a USD is all about sort of collaborative systems. What's your thoughts on that? On how this is going to change how people work?
Well, first, I think it's already changed the way people work,
Hmm.
because, I've said this a lot and coming from software development. We used to come from a waterfall model where, asset A has to then pass through B, to then pass through C,
Yep.
and then pass through D. And it's a very
And then when it's
long.
broken, you have to wait until it
Yeah, and maybe sometimes, right, like, working in comp, I remember sometimes it had to go all the way back to modeling, right?
Yep.
And then that means textures and the shader writers and oh my God, like, and then the animation, and then you're like, oh, right? And then of course you're working 1900 hours because
Yep.
because you're like at the very end of that
Yep.
funnel. Correct?
Yeah.
So I think it's already changed that in terms that now it's a lot more of an agile process, right? And so
Mhm.
what happens here can be visualized, and then everything can start working sort of in like a spiral motion, everybody working at the same time, so that again, you don't have to wait until the very end and you're like in stock in that funnel. And so on that front, I think it's already changed it. I think that also VR has helped on that because it's just like, look, VR is for all the haters out there for VR. Ultimately, for me in virtual production, it's just a visualization medium, just like a Video Village or any other type of monitor. It's just a monitor that you stick in your face, and you're able to just and you just have the ability to have interactions with other people in other parts of the world. So amazing, you can even have meetings that way. So fantastic. So in that way, I think that has changed it as well. The thing that needs to change, I think, is for example, coming from big, heavy visual effects pipelines, is understanding this new way of working and not being afraid of it, because the transition from a traditional pipeline and integrating real-time technologies into it is not really that hard. It's just data, and it's just how you're interpreting that data and how you're bringing that data, how you're pushing that data in and out, how that flow of data is streaming from one end to the other. So there's nothing really to be afraid of. So, just being a little bit more open. And then lastly, I would say, yeah, of course, Omniverse, what Unreal Engine is doing, what we were doing with Beehive, that's the whole point, because we need these collaboration tools. I mean, if the pandemic taught us anything, right?
Right.
Is that to have the ability to at least be virtually in the same, like working in the same place at the same time is crucial. And ultimately, the fact that you can have the people, say, working in an environment and they can't touch any other levels. And then you have the animation people doing animation, but they can't touch the environment levels. That's crucial, right? Because you also don't want like to create a chaos in your content creation process at all. So it's very crucial. But I think first and most important, USD has to be this amazing stairwell to heaven that they keep promising, because ultimately we keep being promised that is the stairway to heaven, but the steps, what do you call it, the scaffolds are
Yeah.
not there. I think I'm not saying those words right, but you get the picture.
Yeah.
Point being, like, yeah, it's the stairway to heaven, but where are the steps?
Right. Yeah. I think, well, it's like anything else that's open source, right? It's only as good as the people working on it. And if people want it, then they're going to work on it more, right? Blender was a pretty good package until suddenly people started really working on it. And then they got a lot more interesting.
Oh, I love Blender. It's so great. Oh my God, I love Blender. Don't get me started on Blender. I love Blender.
Right. Right. But I think that right now, like my feeling is I'm looking at, the visual effects industry, and they're like, we want USD. And so therefore, if they want USD will get better, hopefully. Because I remember the early days.
Yeah.
You got a USD file, you didn't know what to do with it.
Correct. And I think the visual effects industry is trying to rectify that mistake, right? And so just being able, because it was like, I don't know, maybe they started with a very precious sort of mindset. And then it's like, oh no, oh God, let's just be able to, collaborate and transfer data, massive amounts of data in a way that makes sense, and that it's not, super complicated, because it doesn't need to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, actually, now you're talking about the thing that I find it's interesting about the idea of a real-time workflow and collaborative workflow compared to the waterfall workflow is version numbers, right? Before, you would just do an iteration and you put a version number next to that iteration, and then you would wait for the outcome to see where you go. So you had version numbers of models, of textures, of everything, right? In a collaborative workflow, it is a constant state of flux that there doesn't seem to be versioning in the same way? Like how does, and that to some people in the visual effects industry, that's very hard to grasp, is the idea that things are constantly in flux all the time. What's your thoughts on some of that?
I think I can see where the fear, happens because, I've been one of those people with the versioning, system. And
Uh-huh.
of course, right now, there isn't like set naming conventions or versioning standards like there is in visual effects.
Hmm.
However, you can continue working, let's say Maya, right? Like you can continue versioning in Maya just as you usually do. There's no problem there. Once you're bringing in the real time aspect into the mix, you just have to understand that really what you're doing there is just optimizing assets so that you can view and work with them in real time. But it's a very structured way of working and it's all a container, right? And so you just have containers within containers. It's like having, so let's say it's like a big box where you just putting box of that has a lot of complexity inside and inside and inside just so that you can carry the box
Right.
to different places. And then, oh, you need this particular box, third box in. Okay, fine. Here's your box. And then you need the one that's like the smallest one. Okay, here's your box. So there isn't, I see the fear, but they should understand, like the VFX industry needs to understand that it's not that complex, that you can have set project and folder structures, and that the way that the engine handles the data is very smart and it is just self-contained, and that it has ways of dealing with complexity that are really, really smart. So while it may look like chaos on the outside because they don't can do version 1, 2, 3, 4, it's actually way simpler than that, and that's why you have like Beehive. With Beehive, you have a history state where you can go forwards or backwards in time
Hmm.
and see what user did what, and timestamp it, and it gives you the ability to, like, you wouldn't, like, if you and I go at the same time,
Hmm.
you wouldn't be able to mess with what I did and vice versa. And let's say we're working on the same asset, which would be really strange. Why would we be doing that? But let's just say that we're working on the same asset. Still, either you or me, going to be working on it a millisecond before the other one. So if I won by that millisecond, then you're not going to be able to iterate on that, right?
Right.
Then, of course, you have things like version control and source control, and that's how the engine works. So you can have this depot of assets and information anywhere in your company, anywhere in your, whatever, your studio, however you work, in any other location. And the data is just flowing to your local machine and back to that server, just because being in your local machine will make things faster, which is probably also like a total brain explosion for VFX artists that are just not used to working in that
In
way,
local
right?
space. Yeah, no.
Right. But it's just so that it works faster and you can still have that real time, correct?
Right.
But there are mirror ways that you can do that, or you can be working in a virtual machine. So you still have the component of the real time, but it's not really in your local machine if you're worried about security issues.
Hmm.
But ultimately, the data is flowing back and forth, but all the complexity and all the changes are really within that container that is the engine, and how it has that project and folder structure. And it's really smart the way that they do it. And ultimately, just as you would save your last version, that 39, right? And
Hmm.
then if you come back in the morning and you open version 39 and you right away save it to version 40 because you want to have the last one, that's the same thing that happens with version control.
Right.
You're just checking things in and out. So not because you're adding the V1, V2, V3, that means that it's a smarter way of working, right?
Hmm.
It's also, when bringing in real-time technologies, let's not forget that you also have the rendering component aspect of it. So that
Right.
means that you don't need these massive render farms, and you don't need this, you don't need all this massive infrastructure, because now you're actually able to see the output of your work in real time. And so that's also amazing, right? So whatever you feel, if you're still a little apprehensive about the versioning system, well, hell, just remember that you can actually visualize your work in real time instead of working, waiting 3
Yeah.
days while that render's going.
Yeah. 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 Although I do think that there's still, anyway, I have some thoughts about that, obviously, but let's talk about the game engines themselves. Like, what was your thoughts that, obviously when we were doing virtual production in the past, pretty much the only thing you can do any capture with was with Motion Builder or things of that nature, right? So things have changed quite a bit in the last few years. And all of a sudden we started seeing other players come in and completely changed what has happened in virtual production. These game engines came in, and now suddenly the concept of virtual production has exploded in a lot of ways. What do you think is the role here that game engines are trying to do? And what is Epic's really, why do you think they're so involved in virtual production in some ways?
I think because of the potential of just where you're creating a game, because let's not forget that the game engines were made to make games. That's why they're called game engines, right? But I think, again, with just especially when, the heyday of VR, if you will, then seeing how you can start creating this content, right? This interactive, just interactive visual feedback at all times. Well, obviously we all want that, right? Whether you're in animation or you're in filmmaker, you want that. So I think it was a lot of user driven and a lot of user experimentation that then brought the engines to, oh, wait, and then got them really interested in, the media and entertainment market, if you will. And I think now seeing, because ultimately, for example, Unreal Engine, well, they had Matinee and they had, all these ways of creating game cinematics and camera cut tracks and all that. So it's just like translating that into now something like virtual production and filmmaking and animation, which they already had everything there. They just have to, I think the role is, if they're gonna be so focused on media and entertainment and virtual production and our industry, I think then they should also change some of the features and enhance the features so that it's not just made for gamers, right? Or not gamers, but for making the games. And because the one thing that I see, the caveat is sometimes, and I see why this has been a little bit of a setback, is just translating all the concept that you already know coming, say, from visual effects, right, into this game world, the game engine world. It can be a little bit of a mind, you know what.
Yeah.
So I think it's their duty as well is to help the industry understand those concepts and helping that with features that are really user friendly and the user experience is more alike what we already know instead of kind of having to adapt fully to the game creation world. That's my 2 cents. Now I feel like Epic has done a really great job in supporting the industry, because in between the mega grants, the marketplace, the quick sell store, I mean, it's really given, I've seen it in the fellowship, really just seeing the quality of the content that gets created in 5 weeks, it's pretty nuts.
Yeah.
So I think they've really opened the door to a lot of folks that were maybe Flame users. They wanted to change careers. I mean, I feel that they're expanding the roles that you can do as an artist, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting because they do. I'm interested also in filmmakers taking some of that responsibility as well, and I'm starting to see that, which is very exciting, because visual effects people are really great at solving very hard little problems, right? But they don't always see the big filmmaking experience out there. So, when you put one of the things that I think is the most interesting when I was thinking about virtual production is bringing the power of filmmaking, the completely digital filmmaking, to actual filmmakers and telling them, here is your camera. It's the same one you used to use. And that sounds super exciting to me because, I used to do lighting, right? That was my thing. I was a lighter. But I'm not a DP, but I was doing the role of a DP in the same way that an actual DP is. But I would love a DP to actually do his own lighting in virtual production. And that's a much better experience for him to be able to explore that session in some ways. Don't you think?
I do think that, by the way. And see where your thoughts are on this, though. I do and I don't believe that it's in the filmmaker's hands. I agree with you to a point, because we've tried, right? With Dragonfly, our virtual camera. It's put it in the hands of filmmakers, and even though you have the same amount or not the same amount, but the same exact presets, right? As you have in a camera per se, the film back and the lensing and et cetera, you can give them the ICO, like everything that they use to the exposure, everything that they're used to like handling with I think with the parameters. I think the part that they miss using, and even with the most sophisticated virtual cameras that are using, peripheral controllers like a Game Buys or something more advanced where they can do the zoom, the in and out. So they have like that hardware component, if you will. They're still missing like seeing the lens. I feel like the part that they're missing, and that's why they could be a little bit of like a resistance to this. Not for younger generations. I feel like younger generations they're like, what? Just give me a Playbox. I mean, an Xbox or a PlayStation. Oh my God, I combined the two. Oops, the PlayStation controller or the Xbox controller, right? Like because they're used to, like, they were born with technology in their hands. Like they're used with a phone, they're used to the small screen, etc. So they're fine with that. They're grown with that. But older generations, what I've seen is that resistance because they don't have that lens that they can change and and that they know about. I feel that is the resistance there. But I think little by little that will be changing because, again, it's not like you're not going to do principal photography with that camera that you like. It's just, again, maybe you're just expanding the roles and having more virtual cinematographers. And as you say, like the DPs, I've seen some DPs that have like, they were scared first and they have just dove right into virtual production. And once they see, like driving physical sets and then seeing those match up in the engine and then just putting their skills that they know to do like a beautiful lighting shot.
Yeah.
And see how happy they are. I mean, yeah, that's so I agree with you on that.
I do remember actually walking, seeing going to see Ben over at Magnopus, and he was showing me one of the ideas that they were doing, which was, like a wooden virtual crane that they had built. You remember, so it'd feel like a crane, like you were doing an actual crane shot, but they just put a Vive controller on it. In VR, it looked like a crane, but you would have that resistance of feeling that you were dealing an actual crane shot. And I was like, that's actually kind of smart, because people just think, oh no, you just move the camera in Maya and it'll look the same. It's like, no, it won't.
No, it's not. No.
Yeah. No, it needs a hand that actually does something and some reaction. And even like I've always, when I have a digital focus puller, then I know it's going to have that perfection to it. It's going to look really.
Oh my God, the digital focus puller.
Yeah, a digital focus puller, because if you actually have that knob, the hand on the knob, and you time that focus, you can tell that it looks crafted in some ways.
Yeah. And something that I've always said that is very important, it's education, because I don't know, maybe USC, the School of Cinematic Arts, maybe they have, they have a very sophisticated program when it comes to virtual production. They even offer mocap and whatnot. But besides them, I mean, who else would offer this? Either you're still in the traditional filmmaking, teaching that, or, I mean, I don't know. I always hope that, the educators really get on with the program and kind of be at the same pace as the industry, because there's so much, need for talent everywhere. Like there really is. Like there's a lot more content that is going to be produced within the next 5 to 10 years between the streaming wars and everything else, right?
Yeah.
You need that talent, and you need all those types of talents. And I always feel like the schools don't ever keep up with the demand and the technology, which is a shame.
Yeah, I think the schools definitely need to do that. But honestly speaking, it's moving so quickly that the schools barely have time to react and find the talent, to do it. So,
right. But again, I mean, they could partner with people, right? So maybe they're not the ones spending all the money on like this hardware that they don't know about, but, partnering with folks.
Sure.
I mean, that's just an idea. I don't, we don't have to dive deep into the problems of education, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. I first of all, I'm a big fan of virtual production. I definitely think it's, to me, it's filmmaking in a very interesting way. And I've always wanted to make movies, just like you said. I want to do. You saw, Terminator and Alien. You're like, yep, I want to do that. So, to me, it's the same thing. It's just even closer to the actual filmmaking itself. It's very exciting.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I feel that too.
So let's, you kind of, laughingly said, or laughed when you were talking about using the word meta into the meta humans and metaverse, et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of talk about the content of the metaverse and what's going to be out there. What do you think the role of is there going to be a role of virtual production in terms of the meta-ness of our metaverse right now, and how that's going to be part of it?
Right. Well, Chris, I mean, let's define this, because for some people, and I
Yes.
realize this, if you're talking about the metaverse, okay, for some people is the snow crash, Ready Player One, VR game-like world that we're gonna be in a treadmill in our house, and and all these things are gonna happen, and it's just gonna have that visual quality and whatnot, and they think that's the metaverse, right? Some other people, but that's like a futuristic view of the metaverse. Some other people think of the metaverse as what you already have now, like social VR, right? And
Mm-hmm.
platforms like, VR chat and whatnot. But that's the metaverse. For other people, the metaverse is the ability to create assets that are going to be used from the high-end film pipelines all the way to games. And it's just going to be like a reusable asset or a set of assets. And that's kind of like the metaverse, which kind of like omniverse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the metaverse really, are we talking about the decentralized, right? In the Ethereum blockchain
Yep.
metaverse where we can buy land and create NFTs and do all that. Well, I would hope that with the platforms that are available today, I mean, my just biggest fear, so I don't know which one of those metaverses you wanted to touch
Oh, I
on.
love the fact you did the best job of breaking down. I feel exactly the same way you did. You did the best way of breaking it down into those definitions, because it's like people, like it was like last year, people were saying virtual production, you mean LED walls? And it's like, no.
No, no.
So when you said that, it's like, yes, 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 and yes. All of those definitions are there. I am a much broader definition metaverse. For
Oh,
example,
please,
I
please.
I think metaverse to me is just the place of existence that things are going to live in. The data is going to live in a decentralized place. And I think the metaverse itself will be that, right? I don't believe in the central hub system. I don't think that the decentralized hub is actually going to be more interesting. And therefore, the things, the assets, the data that lives inside that place is, to me, the metaverse in a lot of ways. So whether that's even your bank account, that's a metaverse. Whether that is your avatar, that's a metaverse. What you do with that avatar will also be inside of a metaverse itself, or inside the metaverse, etc. So there's going to be a lot of existence that are virtualized inside of this decentralized place. But no, it doesn't mean specifically VR in any way.
No, no, exactly. And the worry for me as well, I mean, I'm with you, and I would hope, because really the promise is this decentralization precisely, but because there is not one place right now that is actually the metaverse, right? Where we could actually just all have like Second Life per se, right?
Sure.
There are all these different platforms, which means that you may not be able to use the same name in one versus the other, etc. Right? Like which one's going to go down, which one's going to be the successful one? Are those like the ones that still exist X number of years from now are going to merge together? What's going to happen then? I'm very interested in all of that. I think there's so much room for growth, play, artistic, kind of experimentation, and also, of course, for people to get rich with NFTs and all this.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, the fact that Facebook rebranded to Meta, ooh, I mean, I just hope that Meta just doesn't become like that. The metaverse doesn't become just the metaverse itself doesn't just become like this crazy, version of Facebook where now it's just
Yeah,
like
I,
terrible
I,
targeted advertising and like, right wing violence, dispersion, and let's bring back the world because of one guy's, idea of how it should be. That's my worry, really. I'm super excited about what you just said, and
right.
for me, everything I just said about the metaverse as well. My worry is the other part.
Yeah, I understand. I definitely think, well, first of all, I think everyone thinks it was a proactive thing to name themselves metaverse. I think it was a reactive thing to call themselves meta, because obviously I think that most people who have been more Web3 oriented have been definitely been like that. Facebook represents the absolute opposite of a Web3 world, right? Because it's it's a Web2 world.
I react to it because also they couldn't it's Facebook is now seen for old people, right?
Right.
Like not for the younger generation. So it's like, oh, what do we do to be cool? But then again, I mean,
well,
you know what I mean.
They also are banking on Meta, meaning VR, and they have they're part of the Oculus.
Correct. So exactly. See, and then you get into the whole tracking thing. Now he's really, I mean, the path through on the Quest 2 is pretty incredible. So now basically you brought the enemy inside your house. Now he can track everything. It's like, it's freaking scary.
Sure. Okay, but let me go back to our loose, broad definition of metaverse.
Very definition. By the way, we have 3 minutes left. So just for the sake of
I'll be
time.
really quick. Okay. What do you think about filmmaking in the metaverse? Like, you and I and a bunch of people all over the world getting in a virtual space and telling stories in our metaverse, and then making a movie or making a story out of us collaborating in that space. Do you feel that that's something that could be done?
That could totally be done. And I think it's such a rich space for experimentation and collaboration, because who's not to say that you do some sort of detective, show or movie, but you're exchanging avatars and you can't really, it's very difficult to follow the clues because you're changing avatars or the detail spaces are changing and whatnot. And that's just one crazy example, because I would love to be a 2-meter kangaroo with red hair in the metaverse, and I would not change that avatar ever if I could. But I just think it's an absolute playground, the meta box for collaboration and experimentation, and for a lot of, really rich content creation.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, yes, I know we're short on time, so I'm not going to let you too long. Very excited to talk to you about this, especially about the VR stuff that I'm very interested in, and I know you are very important person in that area. So I'm really appreciate you being able to share that information. Also, can't wait to hear more about what's going on with you at Technicolor. I'm sure we'll find out very soon, since this is all very new information. So we will make sure to let people, follow up with that and let us people know. But we'll put links in the podcast page so people can check things out. But thank you so much, Mariana. Really appreciate you being on and telling me all these amazing stories. It was absolutely awesome.
Oh, thank you so much, Chris. I wish now I'm let's keep talking about the metaverse. But
I can keep going, but yes, I
know. Me too, but I have a meeting.
Okay.
So,
well, I'll let you go.
So
Absolutely. And we'll keep in touch.
Okay, bye.